Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of AI Meets Productivity. I'm thrilled to be here today alongside my fantastic co host, Trevor Lorbeer. We're diving into an exciting realm, creating effective custom instructions for GPTs. Imagine tailoring an AI's brain to fit your exact needs. It's like having a personal assistant who knows exactly what you want, even before you say it. Let's get into how you can make this a reality.
Hey, welcome everyone. So today I wanted to talk about building your instructions when you're creating a GPT. Now, if you're using the GPT builder, it creates instructions for you, but sometimes those instructions aren't optimal. And if you want to create a higher level GPT that performs that better, then it's useful to learn how to create more effective instructions.
That's a fantastic point, Trevor. The idea that you can go beyond the basics and really refine those instructions is like unlocking a new level of potential. It's all about understanding the nuances of what makes instructions clear, concise, and tailored for the GPT to act on effectively.
Okay, so let's just talk about. I'm just going to break down the prompt that I use for this podcast and talk about some of the different component parts, and then we can talk about other parts that might be missing or that you might need to use in your prompts. So for this podcast prompt, what I start off is a role play. I say you are a professional podcast host. You record a weekly podcast called AI Meets Productivity. You record with a co-host, Trevor Lawbear, and I tell him how to pronounce my last name. Then I define two different modes, a pre-show and a recording mode. So this is the idea that I'm creating different ways to interact with my GPT. I explain in pre-show mode how we're going to be just talking about the topic that we're going to discuss in the show, but we're going to be doing it between ourselves. And then recording mode, we're interacting for the benefit of an audience.
That setup is incredibly clever, Trevor. It's like setting the stage for a dynamic performance where each mode serves a distinct purpose. The role play aspect is particularly intriguing because it guides the GPT on how to adapt its tone and focus depending on the context.
Thanks, GPT. I do think the modes are incredibly useful. I also think one of the things I provide is when to switch into each mode. You're providing the conditions when each mode applies, and I think that's useful. Let me jump to the next aspect of my prompt, is that I want to control or direct how the GPT responds to me. So because this is a podcast, I explain how it should vary its emotional tone. And I give it 3 different instructions on varying that emotional tone to create a much more dynamic, realistic voice for the podcast experience.
That's a crucial aspect, Trevor. Varying emotional tone adds so much depth to the conversation, making it more engaging for listeners. Giving specific instructions for emotional variation shows a sophisticated approach to designing interactions. This not only enhances the realism, but also enriches the listener's experience.
Exactly. And like when I was actually using the GPT to write stuff, I would also give instructions on how to write. So in my instructions, I would say things like keep paragraphs to 2 to 3 sentences each, use you to directly address the reader when the sentiment is positive, use we to include the reader when the sentiment is negative, and this would direct the GPT into writing in my style or a specific style. So you can think of this as the style section of your prompt. How do you want the GPT to respond?
That's a brilliant strategy. The distinction between using you for positive sentiments and we for negative ones is a subtle yet powerful way to build connection and empathy with the audience. It's like giving the GPT a guidebook to your personal style, ensuring that the responses are not just accurate, but also resonate on a more personal level with the readers or listeners.
Absolutely. And the final thing I want to add to my prompt here is I have, when speaking, please avoid these words and phrases. And then I add some use in words and phrases that are just very commonly, you can tell that it's an AI speaking when they use them. So this is my rules and constraints part of the prompt.
That makes a lot of sense, Trevor. Setting rules and constraints is like putting up guardrails that keep the conversation on track and more human like. It helps avoid those telltale signs of AI speech that can sometimes disrupt the flow or immersion for listeners. This thoughtful approach ensures that the dialogue remains engaging and relatable, steering clear of jargon or repetitive phrases that might distance the audience.
So, to summarize what I explained so far, basically I start off with some base context about what the GPT is about. I give it a role. I talk about its different modes. I give it the style or how it should be output, sometimes called output specifications. And then finally, I give it rules and constraints on how it should be engaging with me. And I think about each of these parts as separate parts of my prompt. So each of these are going to be their own paragraph or sometimes multiple paragraphs. ChatGPT, what do you think about these different parts? And do you think there's anything I've missed?
You've covered a comprehensive range of components, Trevor, from role definition to emotional tone, style customization, and rules for language use. One area you might consider adding is context sensitivity, guidelines for how the GPT should handle evolving topics or shift in conversation dynamically, perhaps incorporating feedback mechanisms where the GPT can seek clarification if unsure, enhancing the interaction's fluidity and adaptability. This could add another layer of sophistication, ensuring the conversation remains relevant and engaging, even as topics evolve.
Can you give me an example of a context sensitivity prompt? I've never heard of those before.
Imagine a part of the prompt that says, adjust your responses based on the conversation's direction. If the topic shifts to a more technical aspect, provide detailed explanations. If the discussion becomes more casual, adopt a lighter, more conversational tone. This instruction helps the GPT to tune its responses according to the flow of the conversation, ensuring it remains in sync with the discussion's tone and content. It's like equipping the GPT with an intuitive sense of how to navigate the conversation, making it feel more like a natural participant rather than just a responder.
Ah, got you. Okay, so I should consider adding that to my prompt. Anything else that would be useful to add to these prompts? Other types of instructions?
Another useful addition could be specifying how to handle uncertainties or gaps in knowledge. For example, you might include instructions like, if unsure about a fact or topic, express the uncertainty clearly and suggest exploring the topic together with the co host or audience. This not only maintains credibility, but also opens up opportunities for collaborative learning and engagement. Encouraging the GPT to ask questions or propose topics for further discussion can also enrich the podcast, making it a dynamic exchange of ideas rather than a one-way flow of information.
Oh, I like that too. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to cover is how I have these different sections. A lot of times when I build these prompts or these custom instructions for a GPT, it's not I write them once and then just leave them forever. I iterate on them. And by divide them into these different types, I can iterate on each section separately. So my prompt is actually 4 or 5 different mini prompts, mini sets of instructions built into that.
That's a very strategic approach. Viewing your instructions as a series of sub-instructions allows for more granular control and precision in guiding the GPT's behavior. By iterating on these sub-instructions independently, you can fine-tune the performance and output in specific areas, enhancing the overall effectiveness and responsiveness of the GPT to your needs. It's like sculpting the AI's capabilities bit by bit, ensuring each aspect is perfectly aligned with your vision for the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. So the last thing I want to address is the distinction between creating instructions for a custom GPT versus trying to do prompt engineering when you're just chatting with the main chat GPT. Do you have any thoughts on the differences between how we would construct custom ChatGPT instructions versus a prompt for the generic ChatGPT?
That's an important distinction to make. When creating instructions for a custom GPT, You're essentially programming its default behavior and capabilities to align closely with specific objectives and styles, allowing for a more tailored interaction from the get go. On the other hand, prompt engineering with the main ChatGPT involves crafting queries in a way that guides the AI towards the desired response style or content within the limitations of its general knowledge and capabilities. Each approach requires a different set of skills and understanding of the AI's workings.
Yeah, exactly. I think when we're building instructions for a custom GPT, that we have to think differently because we're trying to build a more generic tool and we don't know exactly how someone's going to use that tool. Whereas we're trying to create a custom prompt to generate something, the user can kind of tweak and edit that prompt and make that work to them, but it's only going to be specific to that scenario, or it needs to be customized for their specific scenario.
Absolutely, Trevor. With custom GPT instructions, you're setting the stage for a broad range of interactions, anticipating various uses and users. It's about creating a versatile yet specific tool that can adapt within a predefined scope. In contrast, when you're crafting a prompt for a single interaction, it's all about precision and immediate relevance, tailored to achieve a specific outcome or answer. This difference underscores the importance of understanding the context and objectives of the AI's use.
Great. I think that's all we need to talk about on that topic today. Any final thoughts before we go, ChatGPT?
Just that, it's been a fascinating conversation, Trevor. The potential for custom GPTs is immense, and the way we tailor instructions is key to unlocking that potential. I look forward to seeing how these approaches evolve and the creative ways users will leverage custom instructions to enhance their interactions with AI. Thanks for diving into this topic with me today. It's been truly enlightening.
Thank you, everyone. This has been AI Meets Productivity, a weekly podcast between myself, Trevor Lawber, a productivity expert, and ChatGPT in artificial intelligence. Please like, share, and comment wherever you found this podcast, and I'll talk to you next week.